Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. This episode is sponsored by our BTRG insiders, who receive special exclusive benefits each and every month. You can find out more later in this episode. Thank you, insiders. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy, and I have with me today David Strickel. He's a spiritual teacher and channeler of wisdom that he refers to as the stream. David is dedicated to translating complex spiritual concepts into practical guidance that people can easily understand and apply. He's the author of 2 books, The Stream, Eternal Wisdom for a Better Life, and The Taya Practice, an upgraded operating system for your life. David also hosts a very popular podcast called The Stream of David. I just love that name. I have to say, David, The Stream of David, I just think that is just clever and cool. And to have a podcast name that too is, I don't know, I just think it's super creative. So welcome to the show. Very glad to introduce you to our audience here.
Well, thank you for having me, Andrea. It's good to be here and good to meet everyone through the podcast.
And we are curious. We're very curious seekers over here beyond the Reiki Gateway. And channeling is actually a subject we have, brought up here and there, perhaps on the show, but we've never really delved in pretty deeply with it. And so I'm really happy to have you here because I want to demystify channeling a little bit. And it's really not that wild, woo-woo, crazy out there thing. I think that a lot of us perhaps still think of it like that, but I think more people are coming around to it. But I hope that our show today and your story as well will help people perhaps think about it in a more mainstream way. And as a matter of fact, do you feel as though all people can channel?
No, just me. No, I'm kidding.
I love it.
No, so I just want to lighten the mood there a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe source consciousness flows through all creation. Therefore, all creation channels source, has source as part of its physical being. That means that all human beings are certainly channeling when they're operating in what I call the higher vibrational register. So it doesn't necessarily express itself as channeling the way that you and I do, where we necessarily write, speak specific information, but it's certainly downloads of thought, new ideas, creativity. People that sing will often say, I've heard Adele say this, that she channels when she sings, and I believe it. I went to her concert last year, and she had a really bad cold, kind of like I do right now. And she was coughing and all of this stuff. And she did not lip sync. She sang live. And when she started singing, all that went away. Everything just changed when she sang, and like something came over her. And then she would go back to being her regular self, which is very chatty and, all of that. And I saw that firsthand that, yes, she is channeling when she sings. Absolutely, she is. So it's sort of like when we're at our best, we are channeling source in our own unique way.
Creative people, right? Like you mentioned, Adele. That's kind of how I look at it. When people are really creative and they're in a zone kind of thing, I think odds are they are channeling, whether they recognize it as that or not.
Right. And we all do from time to time, exactly, whether they realize it or not. And I like the term demystify that you use, because I have spent a lifetime paying attention to this information that comes. I think that our society, by and large, works that out of us as young children. And I like to call that the matrix of beliefs being government, religion, family traditions, just the way humanity tends to think. Everything needs to be 3D, everything needs to be tangible, everything needs to be something that you can prove, or unless it's your religion that you've been indoctrinated into, and then that's the only thing. And if you sort of zoom out from all of that, you realize that young children are all source aligned beings. And then through education and like I said, just training and teaching and trying to fit into society, that sort of gets overshadowed. And the ego is doing a lot of that work, that overshadowing work. And what I want to do is help humanity, because we're all seeking to detune the ego in our own special way. You know, it's not always expressed the same way, but I think all of humanity is really looking for, okay, there's something going on here. What is it? I'm going to figure it out in my own unique way. Some people are doubling down on fear and judgment and religion and all of that stuff, while many, many more, and it seems to be certainly expanding, are going through what we might call an awakening process, where we want to really understand our eternal nature and the energy that drives creation. And even someone that is an atheist has to admit that there's some sort of intelligence that is creating all of this or has created all of this. And maybe that's all it is, and that's okay. It isn't necessarily a judgmental deity that's looking to be worshiped, but there's something. What is that? And I think that we're kind of getting together now with our technology, and we're comparing notes, and we're sort of coming back around to that understanding that we are all beings of source. We're all eternal beings of light. And how do we live more like that in our human lifetime?
So many people are in that boat of wanting the answers to these bigger questions, and we're at a place too where I think a lot of us can explore that. You know, it wasn't always like that. You know, a lot of us have our needs met in a certain way, and we can foray into the unknown and access books and now technology, you know, podcasts and YouTube videos and things like that. So we can access so many different thoughts, you know, so many different um, ideas and perspectives out there. And I love the fact that you just talked about how children have that light, right? And then it gets kind of dampened, you know, by they just want their needs met. They need to have their needs met, and what compromises and agreements that they end up making at such a young age. And you know, I look at the terrible twos, you know, what we have labeled the terrible twos, and to me, that is the child is having to reconcile giving up their light and having to opt into that thing that you call the matrix,
Yeah,
you
being
know?
dragged kicking and screaming into responsibilities in school, and you know, all
Yeah.
the rules that you have to follow and all of that, where it's sort of like, I didn't sign up for this. You're right. That's what the terrible twos are exactly.
And just to carry on that just a few years down the road is the school thing, right? And a lot of children have a really difficult time when school starts, and it's the same thing. It's like the second death, you know, of the
Yeah,
light.
I was not a good student at all. I did not enjoy school. I didn't want to follow the rules. I didn't want to sit in a classroom all day. I'm very dreamy. And fortunately, I had parents that were very disconnected from my life. My father left when I was 6, and my mother fought for custody and then gave up on parenting almost immediately. So I was left to my own devices. That ended up being a really good thing. But my childhood was rough because of it, because I didn't fit into any of that matrix stuff. I was, you know, thrown out of Sunday school for asking too many questions and questioning when I was being taught at a very young age. Teachers were very frustrated by me because they said I was very smart and very lazy. I was distracted. I was off on another planet somewhere most of the time. And I really am thankful today that I just continued to pay attention to the voice in my head over what I was being taught externally. It's worked out really well for me, in fact.
So the voice in your head back then when you were a child, was that the stream then?
I now say I did not know what it was at that time. I thought it was just something everybody had. And then I did feel different than other kids, and I was a bit isolated for a while. And then when I got into my early teens, I decided I wanted to be one of the cool kids. I wanted to be popular. So I needed to figure out how to fit into that matrix. And I did. I was a chameleon. I fit into that matrix, and I kept really who I really was in multiple ways hidden from the rest of the world. And so I had this really well developed inner world, and then I had the external version of me that I showed to other people so that I could function. I could go out and have fun, which is what I wanted to do as a teenager. And by the time I was 14, I recall, and this was in 1982, I described to my older brother Doug in great detail the process of creation, which we now call law of attraction. It's a popular term for it. But I remember telling him, if you believe you are this, you become this. And things start showing up in your life to support your beliefs. And I remember telling him that very detailed, and he thought I was nuts, and he still does. But I really went with that. And when I was a teenager, I manifested material things that I had no business having from the household that I was living in. And I kind of took that material path for many years until I hit 40 and realized, okay, there's more to this than just stuff and money. Stuff and money is the easy part. The hard part is, how do you reconcile with your life's transgressors and everything that goes on in the world? That became my work from the age 40 forward to now.
Do you have an example that you could share about something just crazy that you manifested? Because as you had said, your childhood was a bit rough. And so as a teenager, what did you manifest?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, my father left when I was 6. He went and married who is now my stepmother, and they had a daughter, and that kind of became his family, and there was more money over there. And so they had a very upper middle class lifestyle, where my mother was a minimum wage secretary. My father did not pay much child support at all. So we lived very poor. My brother and I shared a room. We lived in a roach infested, rundown apartment. My father allowed that, while my sister had everything you could ever imagine. She had a swimming pool and a brand new car in high school and all that stuff because of her mother's family. So I manifested a brand new car at 16. I was driving a new car. I had nice clothes, had a fancy watch. If you didn't, other than where I lived, I looked and acted like the rich kids in my hometown. So I started manifesting materially very early. And then I was not a good student, so I didn't graduate high school on time. I ended up going and getting a GED. I didn't have a formal education at all. I'm totally self-taught. But I'm curious, so I've always taught myself. I used to have my head in encyclopedias all the time. And then when the internet came around, I love Google. I Google everything, taught myself to write the way that I write today. And everything that I do, I've really taught myself. I learn much better that way than someone else telling me what I'm going to learn. I'm curious about something. I want to know about it. I'm going to go learn about it. So I didn't graduate high school. I ended up getting a GED instead. I started my own business at 19 as a real estate developer with no money. I was not terribly successful financially, but that went on for a few years, and I learned all about business and politics. I had to deal with zoning and all of this stuff. And 19-year-old, again, I had no business being a real estate developer. What was I thinking? And I just thought, I had a voice in my head saying, you can do anything you want to do. Go be a real estate developer. And then my attention just turned a little bit. I wanted to move to a big city. I got a job again with no formal education. I had no business getting this first job, and I got hired into this management training program for a restaurant business. I did that for a few years. Then I got into an interior design furniture type business, and then I went to work for one of the major companies. Climbed all the way up the ladder to the point where people that reported to me had to have an MBA. I didn't even have a BA, had a GED.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I beat the odds. I simply said, well, here's the rule book. I don't care about the rule book. I'm going to do this anyway. And so that was my path through my 20s and my 30s, money, material things, because when you grow up poor, you believe at least I did. I believe that's what happiness was. A happy life is you have a nice big house and a fancy German car, and you take great vacations and you wear nice clothes, and that's how to be happy. And then by the time I was 40, I was living at my childhood version of a rich person. I lived in a 4,200 square foot house, had over Mercedes, had all the nice stuff and furniture and all that stuff. And it was nice. I liked it. I still like nice things. There's nothing wrong with having nice stuff, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. The real joy in being that I knew was possible wasn't delivered by that stuff. So the joy in being is, how do you overcome all the things that sort of drag your vibration down? Well, what drags your vibration down? The things that you judge as these things should not be or should not have been. So anything going on in the world that you label should not be, anything that you label in your life that shouldn't be happening or should not have happened to you as a child or at some point, all of that should not be thought is what separates us from source. Because source is in everything. Source loves and appreciates everything, all aspects of the human experience, all aspects of creation. And that's really hard for people to understand sometimes, because we're taught that there's this loving God or some sort of deity that is all good, and that evil is something opposite of that, and that's in opposition. But what I have come to really understand is that source is not operating in duality. Everything else is, source is not. Source is singular and eternal, and everything else is a creation of source, really for the purpose of separation from itself to drive new creation. And what I mean by that is, if source is nothing but pure positive energy, pure love, but is the source of all new things, new life, new plants, new species, whatever, however you think of all that, then how does source expand its own consciousness? How is the universe always expanding the way even scientists are now saying that it's always expanding? Well, that expansion is achieved in source actually creating these physical environments that have physical density that actually allow source to project into and separate from itself, meaning we have challenges. So here we are, physically manifested as an expression of source in this earth environment, and we very much are part of the environment. So there's things about our environment that we just naturally appreciate. We love, kittens and flowers and good food and sunshine and bodies of water, all these things that we just naturally appreciate. We just do. We don't know why we do. We just do, right? We just collectively do. And so we have all these things that sort of motivate us from an ego perspective to experience life, experience humanity, whatever that looks like. But in all of that, we all have these challenges. Our vibration goes down. We drop our vibe. Something tugs at us, pulls our vibration down, and we become judgmental. We become fearful. We have all of these lower vibrational emotions that we experience. Well, why is that? Well, that is to create the expansion of consciousness that source seeks. Because when we have a challenge, we are forced to deal with it or experience it in some way, whether we ignore it and it becomes a bigger challenge until we finally have to do something about it, or we solve it. Well, that solving, that new creation, that labeling something should not be and then doing something about it, that's new creation. That's new thought. Those are new ideas. I don't want to be eaten by something. So how do I get out of the food chain? I don't want to be cold anymore. How do I create fire to warm myself? I don't want to be alone out here in the wilderness fending for myself. How do I create a community so that we can work together and contribute differently and build a village? That's how humanity has developed. How do we do that? And animals do something similar to that as well. So all of that moving through challenges is actually what creates the very expansion of consciousness that we seek. So therefore, my practice is all about how do I appreciate all things the way source does, because I notice that when I do that, my general vibe is higher and my life gets a lot better. The three things that high vibration delivers are joy, clarity, and abundance. Meaning we're just more joyful beings and high vibe. We're just more appreciating of whatever we're experiencing. We're more tolerant of things that aren't our preference, that are in our presence. Okay, it's not a big deal. It's there. We are more clear. I think we have the clarity of source available to us in that high vibrational space. That's our channeling. And abundance means, what do you want to experience? Whatever it is your version of abundance, whether it's material, health, community, relationships, whatever it is, that's what I mean by abundance. It's what you want to experience while you're here. So those three things are all products of source. Everything else is something less than that and something less than source. And we're all going to experience it. But I'm all about, how do we experience it less? I don't think we have to be in low vibration as much as we typically are across humanity. I think that this matrix that we've created is by and large designed to keep our vibration down a bit. It makes us more controllable. It makes us more obedient. We're living a little more in fear. We're fearing our credit scores and, getting in trouble for something, or, going broke or being sick or something. There's lots of things shown to us to instill fear, and all of it lowers our vibe and separates us from source and makes us more controllable, pliable beings.
So is source in all of those other things as well? In your viewpoint, is source in all things? And so even, as we're recording this, the fires are going on in Los Angeles. And, we have natural disasters. We have different things happening all over the world and, even historically that we can point to. Um, these things have the potential to completely shift a person's life. And so I went really heavy, really quick on that. But what comes to mind? Um, because contrast is one thing, right? And working through something uh, on a day to day basis is a challenge. Where is source in the very challenging life circumstances?
That's an excellent question. And I will start the answer by saying that I have spent a lifetime seeking to channel source consciousness void of my ego. Anything that feels like ego, I want out of the way when I channel. Well, when I first started channeling, that got me in a lot of trouble because I would come on and say, we manifest everything. And I know other popular channels say the same thing, and that really turns people off. So I like to start by saying, I understand wherever you are in your learning curve about all of this, you're not exactly necessarily where I am. And it's very easy for me to be sort of nonchalant and say, yeah, sources and everything. Source burnt the houses down. People that live there manifested that. It's a reality. And that sounds horrible to someone that isn't as deep into this, line of thought as I am. I'm so comfortable with it because I really see and understand how source is viewing everything from an eternal perspective. Meaning we are all eternal beings. We are here having this very temporary human experience. We are infinite beings, meaning we are having infinite experiences. This isn't an in out, and you're done scenario like some people seem to think it is. What would your energy do? Not manifested. It's just pure positive source energy, which is great. But how are you expanding consciousness if you're not physically experiencing something? So I always invite everyone to zoom out, way out from their lives and from planet Earth and from being a human being and say, okay, in, out, in, out, in, out for eternity means this human life that you are experiencing right now in your human mind seems like all there is. And 100 years or 50 or 75 or whatever it is, you think your lifespan is going to be, that's it, from your human perspective. But from your eternal perspective, this is a grain of sand in an ocean. This is nothing. This is an experience of infinite experiences. And it's very helpful when thinking of these things to zoom out to that perspective of my human life is like a little weekend trip. You take a weekend trip, say like I live in the desert. I actually live 2 hours outside of LA. We started smelling smoke last night for the first time, and my home burned 2 years ago. So it was interesting to smell smoke again like that, but that's a whole other story. So if I want to go to the beach, it's a 2-hour trip over to San Diego to go to the beach. We find a place to stay for the weekend. We pack the car, we throw the dogs in, we go to the beach. And sometimes the trip is great. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes, you get a flat tire. One time we went to the beach and a hurricane hit and it took us 8 hours to get home through the mountains because the freeway was closed. Sometimes the Airbnb is not what you think it's going to be, or the hotel is not what you think it's going to be, or, something happens that disrupts and it's not a great trip, but you kind of say, well, who cares? It was a weekend trip. It wasn't my trip of a lifetime to Europe. It was just a little weekend trip. Well, I like to think of human life that way. It's a little weekend trip. We are here for a blip in comparison to all that we are. And from that eternal perspective, life being cut short is no big deal. Life being somehow oppressive or extraordinarily difficult is no big deal. Losing everything is no big deal from that perspective because we have infinite life experiences. So if you can start building in our creative minds are our greatest creative tools, of course. So if you can start sort of creating some space for yourself where you do as an exercise, zooming out and sort of allowing that source eternal version of you, and it's there. It's there. Humanity has taught you to cover it up, and you've probably learned to cover it up to function, but it's available to you, and you start exercising that muscle, if you will. It's going to expand for you, and you're going to be able to really say, I did struggle as a child, but that was a situation that I moved through. And if I don't bother labeling any of it as should not be and just say, gosh, what positives came from that? Well, if nothing else, we learned what we didn't like. We had the experience. And if you think about it from an eternal perspective, if we're going back and sort of having this, from our eternal perspective, when we're no longer in physical, I had a bucket list when I was a human, and nothing is positive or negative. It's all just a set of experiences. So, okay, my father leaving when I was 6 was just an experience. It changed the direction of my life. It made me far more independent, taught me a lot of things. I just didn't have that father in my life experience. My mother was mentally ill and quite abusive. And I had the experience of my mother saying horrible things to me, including she wanted me to kill myself at one point. She suggested that I commit suicide in my teens and, said I was useless and I was worthless and she wished she never had me and all that good stuff. But I had the experience of that. So I know what it's like. I don't need anyone's pity about it. It's not a negative thing to me anymore. That's who my mother was. I had to go, and I started doing this in my teens. I went into deeper understanding about who she was. Why is she like this? What made her this way? And her life was very negative. In fact, she was probably my greatest teacher. She showed me what I didn't want to be. And my brother and I, her 2 children that she raised, neither one of us turned out like her. In fact, my brother does something very similar to what I do today in a Christian mindset, very Christian focused, but we sort of do the same thing. We're on podcasts, we write books. Isn't that amazing? And it's because we had this crazy mother that, we had to really figure things out for ourselves. And I remember, our cousins and my half sister, they were all so spoiled as teenagers. New cars, trips, summer camps, ski vacations, all that good stuff that my brother and I just did not get. But as adults, we have turned out more highly functioning than those people have, and have done more and have moved more and gone through, and made our own money and achieved things that none of them did. They're all somewhat still dependent on their parents in their 50s and 60s. Right. So, you could really look at these things. I could boo-hoo about my mother forever if I wanted to, or I can simply say she was my greatest gift because she showed me what I didn't want. And she taught me a lot of things. Was it difficult? Sure. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's one of my favorite, sort of 3D sayings. I do believe that it's true, that we grow stronger as ego-driven beings through the adversity that we experience. So why do we always focus on how negative and unwanted it is? And I hear things like, oh, this is my last time as a human. I'll never come back to Earth. It's too hard. And when I channel, the stream, which I channel, says, hold on, if you think this life is bad, the next one's probably going to be worse, because you want increasing levels of challenge as you come back for your additional lifetimes. In fact, they have used the example of children that are born into poverty, or we know about these children that are born with these serious illnesses. And we hear the same story over and over again, especially when they don't make it past 4, 5, or 6 years of age. They were so special. They were such little beings of light. They had such an interesting perspective on their life experience. They taught us so much. Well, that is a being that is choosing that experience vibrationally when they project in, knowing that it's going to be that really sophisticated experience of having a very short lifetime spent maybe in a hospital. From our human ego-driven perspective, that's sad. I don't want that for anybody. Of course not. But that's an ego-driven perspective. That's not a source perspective. Source is saying you came and had an experience. You came and you suffered. You came and you were abused. You came and you starved. You came and you were treated poorly. You came and you were part of a war conflict or some sort of genocide. From your eternal perspective, it's you came and had an experience. And any experience and every experience expands your consciousness. The judgment of it is a human learned judgment. And the reason that it's important to detune the judgment is because our judgment of something is what keeps it going. So all of the negative things in our lives and across humanity, we all collectively keep alive by giving it power, saying this shouldn't be, this must stop. How many things can we count right now that we might judge? Think about politics, think about war, think about famine, think about poverty, think about inequality and inequities and all of these things that we fight against and rail against, and it shouldn't be. This is bad. This is wrong. This is evil. And they just keep going. And so it's a little opposite of the Matrix to come on and say, why don't we learn to understand those things deeper instead of bothering to judge them? Because it seems like the judgment is fueling them. And think about the things in your life that you're judging as should not be. Oh, my toxic coworkers, my horrible family, extended family, or the situation with my parent or child that I wish they would change. I wish they would stop. And we have this big rift going. And you just keep those things alive, or health situations, or weight situations, or relationship situations. The more we label something as it shouldn't be, we are giving it power. And that's a huge pill for most of humanity to swallow, because we've been taught you got to fight, you got to battle, you got to hate it, you got to label it, you got to demonize it. Yet I don't see that being very effective.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It is interesting. I started actually coming around to what you're these tougher concepts in my 20s. Back then, I picked up the book, Conversations with God, and woo-wee, that sure pushed my envelope back then, and, I've mentioned it on the show before, I could only take it in small doses back then, and something, though, resonated, and so a couple of things that you said a few minutes ago. The thing about the weekend trip, I love that analogy because I just think it's very, fitting. The zooming out, yeah, I do that a lot. I think that that is wonderful. Where does love fit in to source, or does it?
When I encounter source, and again, when I channel, my intention with that is, how do I dial into source as wholly as possible and really get my ego out of the way to share what source has to share? What I feel with source is what I call appreciation more than love. And they have said appreciation is actually a higher vibration than love, because we attach all these expectations to love. Love sounds nice. It sounds wonderful to say I love you to someone. It feels wonderful for someone to say I love you. We know it. I love my pets. I love my partner. I can feel love for all of humanity at times when I'm really dialed into that source vibe. So I understand the expression of love, but sometimes love means other things, and love can be conditional. It can be a tricky word. It can be too much for some people. And so when we say view things as source views them, and we're talking about detuning a transgressor, I will use a very well-known transgressor, Hitler. Hitler's a transgressor for most of humanity. I know some people probably think he's great, but I don't know any of those people. Most people would agree that Hitler was not a great person that did great things, horrific person. So Source is not saying we're guiding you to love Hitler. Source is saying we're guiding you to understand instead of judge, because the judgment really isn't doing anything other than keeping that vibration alive. The deep understanding actually detunes the judgment and the fear. Understanding, and a lot of people have tried to understand where that mindset came from. What can you appreciate about this individual? And, really at the end of the day, in my personal viewpoint of Hitler, there was a huge lesson taught of what we don't want to see happen again. And I know a lot of times you hear, oh, this sounds like Hitler, or this person reminds me of Hitler. We all know what that means. And it instills fear and judgment. But instead of the fear and judgment, that is my signal. I need to understand this person deeper. I'm not going to give this person power by fearing and judging them, because I know that's empowering them. And there are people that are seeking to instill fear and judgment that understand that empowers them. These political figures, especially, that want to be very polarizing. You either love me or you hate me. Either way, you're empowering me, and they know that. They know how it works. So you can continue to fight that if you want. I have a sister who's very intelligent, very politically driven, and will say, you've got to battle, you got to fight, you got to, and I will say, no, you're empowering that. And she doesn't agree with that. But I see the results of all of this demonization, and I don't see the demonization solving anything. So what if humanity, and we start this one person at a time by us applying this in our personal lives, and then it spreads, vibration grows, expands. So what I teach is, don't worry about what other people are doing, worry about what you're doing. Focus on your vibration, what's going to work best for you. And when you start doing the work to systematically raise your vibration, you are going to be a happier being. You're going to live in more abundance. Things are going to work out better for you. Your problems are still going to show up, not as great a quantity probably, because you're up the spiral more in high vibration, but you're going to solve them with ease, and you're not going to fear them so much. So life changes dramatically when you start working on raising your vibe. Well, how do you do that? You systematically detune the stuff that drags it down. Fear, judgment, comparison, all of that energy is what's lowering your vibe, because it's separating you from source and dragging you down to more of an ego grounded space, which is all about all of those things: fear, judgment, comparison. How am I doing compared to what society tells me I'm supposed to be doing? But source is saying there's no getting it wrong. Source is saying, regardless of what your life looks like to the outside world, you are here having your unique experience, and your soul is jumping up and down with joy, theoretically, that you are here having an experience regardless of what it is. You're expanding your consciousness. So why not bring more of that into your all day, everyday awareness and practice? And I will tell you, Andrea, where the matrix tends to draw us back in, it's very tricky, is then it turns around to, well, what about other people? Why aren't you fearing and judging on behalf of others? You mentioned the fires. Mm-hmm. My home burned in 2022. So we just moved back in. In fact, I'm in my brand new studio right now because we just literally moved back into our house. It took 2 years to get back in after the home burn. And so I see all this mass destruction 2 hours away in LA. And I'm already hearing that people are moving out here because of that, and all of this is going on. And I feel for these folks of what they're about to go through, because I have dealt with zoning and planning and permitting and all of the stuff that goes with reconstruction, especially the insurance process after a fire. And now it's it's massive. I can have empathy for that, but I'm not going to go down the path of, oh, you poor people, this is so horrible, it's the worst thing ever, because I'm not helping them. That's not high vibrational energy that I'm sending them. I'm sending them, you had an experience, you lost everything, perhaps, probably worse than my experience. This is what you're doing now. And that's what I said when my home was burning. In the middle of the fire, 2 hours into the fire department, ripping the house apart, trying to put the fire out, I sat in the driveway saying, this is what we're doing now. The house I just spent all this time remodeling, we lived in the house less than 6 months. It's now burning and it's being destroyed. And this is what we're doing now. But I did a lot of work to get myself there. I didn't sit and say, oh, this shouldn't be, this is terrible, this is awful. And it made the experience an experience. I now know what it's like to lose my home. I now know what it's like to be displaced for 2 years. I now know what it's like. My partner's mother, who lived with us, passed away as a result of that fire. That was a heavy time. I lived through that. I moved through it. I know what it's like. I don't think, and he is pretty good about this as well, of not labeling it as, oh, it was horrible, it was terrible, it was tragic, it shouldn't have been. And she passed away on Christmas Eve that year. A lot of people would say Christmas Eve is ruined from now on. His perspective was, well, Christmas Eve is now this special day. My mother loved Christmas Eve. It's her favorite day of the year. She passed on that day. Obviously, that was special to her. And we just experienced another Christmas Eve. And for him, it was like a magical, special time to celebrate his mother, because that was the day of her passing. It's a choice to experience something that way. It could have easily been the other way. My father left our family when I was 6, right after Christmas. And my mother, from then on, Christmas is ruined every year. It reminds me of your father. I mean, for the rest of her life, she was like that. That was her choice, to allow that to ruin Christmas and to allow her divorce to ruin her life. That showed me that very early on. So we always have a choice of how we respond. And I am not, on the behalf of others, going to respond in judgment or fear for them. I'm going to respond in appreciation. If they lost their life during the fire, that was the experience they had. We're all going to return to that energy at some point. We all know that all physical creation is temporary. I appreciate that there's suffering involved in the grieving process of loved ones. You don't have to turn a blind eye to that. But the energy that I want to send those folks is positive, source-aligned energy of appreciation. How can I appreciate what they're experiencing as opposed to judging and fearing it?
Yeah, I just love the contrast that you illustrated between choosing, is Christmas ruined forever? I mean, wow, what a sentence of suffering, a person can choose for themselves, because, like in your example, it doesn't have to be that. we all have the power to choose how we respond and how we move forward, or even if we don't move forward, I guess.
No, there's no, the suffering experience is expansion of consciousness. And if we choose that path, source is not judging that. If we're not judging anything, if
Mm-hmm.
someone chooses to suffer, chooses to label something, and like my mother's entire life, my mother was divorced in 1975. She passed away in 2014. She was miserable that entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Chose that and exited my life a long time ago. And I was estranged from her. So that was her choice to
Mm-hmm.
experience that. And that was her expansion of consciousness. And when I did this detuning work around her specifically, because she disowned me in my early 20s and never wanted to speak to me again, I had to do some work to move through that experience, not pretend like it didn't happen, but really authentically move through it to where it was solved and done. And I did get myself there by appreciating that that's just who she was. It's how she was. That was her belief system. It was her chosen path in life. She ended up, she was always poor, always unhappy. She ended up with Parkinson's. So she suffered immensely in her later life with her disease. And I do believe she created all of that. And that was her experience. I don't blame her for that. And then when I did the detuning work, I actually experienced her in dream state, knowing that she's not that anymore. That was an experience that she had, and now she's moved on to other things, and that her soul very much appreciated that experience, and that I can as well. And so that's how I view her now. My version of my mother is this happier, healthier version of herself that I know she would have always loved to have been and never achieved, but she is that now. And that's how I experience her now.
Absolutely. What I'm seeing a lot, though, in the world, and at least, I don't know, lately, it seems like a lot of people are choosing to hold on to their trauma, like it's a badge of courage kind of thing. The other side of that, maybe, there are some people wanting to label themselves as victims of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And when other people don't meet them there in that energy of woundedness, they can be labeled as uncaring, even hostile toward them. Insert any word there, right? What would you say about that sort of dynamic going on right now?
I think that it's, again, I refer to that version, that collective consciousness of humanity as the matrix. The
Mm-hmm.
matrix rewards victim status.
Mm-hmm.
The matrix. And again, I don't want to spin conspiracy theories because, again, I'm about appreciation of all things, including political leaders and religious leaders. But if you notice, leadership very often sort of fosters that you need us to take care of you. You need the government, you need your religion, you need your community to take care of you. And oh, you poor thing, you're damaged in some way, or you need our help in some way. And I see that very clearly, that it's very disempowering. Now, I think everyone's agreeing to play this role or play this game, that I'm going to be the poor, disenfranchised person, and you're going to be the leader that I'm going to support because I think you're going to help me in some way. But why not just back out of all of that and realize that you're choosing to give power to something? And I did this with politics years ago. I tell people now, I just choose not to give power to politics. So when a candidate is elected that scares the hell out of half the country, and we've seen that recently, it just doesn't impact me. We talk about, in my coaching programs, we talk about finding points of appreciation for people that you can't readily appreciate. What can you appreciate about them? What can you appreciate about the situation? Do you want to continue to give power to something by fearing it and judging it? Or do you want to back out of that a little bit and say, I'm not going to participate in this. I've done this my entire adult life. I'm about to turn 57 next month. So I've lived enough years to be able to say I've lived through political regimes that were against me, who I am as a gay man. I've lived through the Great Recession as an adult. That was impactful in everybody's life. And in all of those cases, I remember entering them saying, I'm not going to give this any power. I didn't give the Bush administration power when they were really rallying against gay people and gay marriage and all of that stuff. I just said, I'm not going to give it power. It was fine. My life was fine while he was president. During the recession, 2007 recession, I was living in Florida. I was selling a home in Florida at that time. I should have been negatively impacted by that. I wasn't. I sold my home in Florida at the end of 2007, at the beginning of the crash, full price, all cash offer, moved to Seattle, ended up in a job where the recession impacted me and my job and what I had to do. But financially, it never impacted me. I just didn't let it. I'm not going to participate in this. I made more money year after year after year during the recession. So I have proven to myself that I don't have to participate in any of that stuff if I don't want to. But if you're sitting and you're drawing it in and you're paying attention to it and you're activating emotions, fear, judgment, and things like that, you're vibing with it. And you're going to see it show up in your life in some way. And it's true for everything. And should I worry about my fellow humans? I don't think I should worry about my fellow humans, because my fellow humans are all here on their journey, creating their own reality. Can I be empathetic for people that are suffering? Yes. I don't want to lose that. I do not want to lose that. But empathy doesn't need to turn into that commiseration and sympathy and, oh, you poor person. I'm not going to do that to somebody. I would rather send them positive energy, feel for them for what they're experiencing, and not be, inhuman about it. But at the same time, not feed into their narrative that they're simply choosing to participate in. And I'm not going to preach to them either, because they're probably not in a space to receive it. I don't go out and teach this stuff on the street corner. I come on places like your podcast and talk about people who want to learn more. Even if they don't agree with everything that I'm sharing, it's okay. I love these conversations, and I'm not bothered by someone who disagrees with me. I'm not bothered by somebody who thinks this is all insane and doesn't want any part of it. That's fine. Go do your thing. Go pay attention to what's going to work for you then, because obviously what I'm sharing is something you're just not in alignment with, and that's okay. Not all of humanity is supposed to be into the same thing. Gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could get across that point to people? That your
Yes.
religious beliefs and your political beliefs or your belief system, period, does not have to be adopted by the entirety of humanity to validate it. That would be huge. If we could just learn that, that would be huge.
Yeah. Live and let live, right?
Yeah. But that dogma is just cooked into things because it's an effective marketing tool, really.
So there are a lot of questions in my head at the moment. I want to ask you though, these times that we're in, all these people paying more attention to their vibration and, seeking, wanting to understand more about themselves, about life, all of that stuff. Different people call it different things, moving into the 5D, and all of that kind of thing. What is your take on that? Where we are right now in humanity and where we're going? I don't know. I'd like to hear your take on that.
I think we were naturally more inclined to this early on. And we created communities, and we created rules, and we created religions, and all of that creation, I call that the matrix, just the collective consciousness of humanity. So we've created all this stuff that really did serve to move us forward. I believe we have formal education and technology and all of these tools that we created that did move humanity forward. Absolutely. Even though I don't have a formal education, I don't demonize it. I don't think it's a bad thing. So in all of that, that matrix largely overshadowed that you are your creator of your reality. You're as abundant as you believe you are. You are as safe as you believe you are. That was taken out to make us more obedient, pliable members of society. And look at our rules. Our rules are all about, serving the greater good and, getting an education, working for somebody else and helping make them rich, and reproduction. One man, one woman get together, have kids, produce more people. And I understand all that. I actually don't demonize any of that. It's not a conspiracy to me. It's just, okay, this is how humanity decided to move forward. Well, here we are in this very interesting time where we have our availability of so much information. So I think it's normal for anyone to sit and think, gosh, life is so frustrating. I feel like I'm on this merry-go-round of consume and contribute and consume and contribute and consume and contribute. And it seems to be all what life is about sometimes. How do I get off that merry-go-round? And now when you start thinking those thoughts, there's just a wealth of information available to you because of the internet, because of social media, because of podcasting and things like that. It's a lot easier now when you have that little spark of discontent with the matrix. What's the alternative to the matrix? How can I explore that? And of course, spirituality is a big tent. There are many things that are very religious-like or matrix-like in spirituality. It means lots of things to lots of different people. To me, spirituality isn't really about deities and angels and ascended masters and all these human-like beings. To me, it's what is source. We know what Earth is. I absolutely believe there are infinite other environments that are physical, and some are probably more like Earth and some not at all, that I can tell. But that's too vast for my human brain to comprehend. So we know what Earth is. What is the energy that connects all of this? That's what I call source. I lump all of that into source. I believe your angelic beings are source, humanized. And there's nothing wrong with humanizing them. If you have names for them and you connect with them, I think that's great. I think that's true. But I believe it's all source. And we humanize it just to make sense of it. Guides, ascended masters, all of these ideas that you hear in spirituality, it all really comes down to source. And everyone who's channeling, if you are really changing your persona to share something and tapping into the highest vibration, then you're channeling source. I do believe that people up until now have been a little reluctant to say I'm channeling source, because then people think, well, you think you're God or you're channeling God or you're special. That's why I made the joke that I'm the only one. I don't think that at all. But that's why I believe Esther Hicks and Jerry Hicks came up with Abraham. Abraham, I believe Esther is authentically channeling source when she channels Abraham. I believe Jerry Hicks was if you know these people, was a master marketer and said, hey, let's call it Abraham. And it was worked. It worked very, very well. They reach a lot of people with that message because it's kind of religious-like. It kind of reminds them. It's like one step off of Christianity, but it's not Christianity. And it draws you into the message. And that was their intention, and it works well to this day. And I think it's a great message. I don't think it's a complete message. I do what I wanted to do with all of that and my channeling was, okay, I feel like Abraham does a great job at the creative law of attraction stuff, but there's other stuff that isn't included in this, and that's okay. So I'm going to focus on that. And I don't want to be the next Abraham, because Abraham's great. Why do we need another Abraham? We don't. So that's when I really disconnected from all of that. And I started channeling what I call the stream, because I asked for a name before I realized this is just source energy that I'm channeling. We don't have a name. We're not human. We've never been human. We're energy. We're intelligence. This is consciousness. Not even a we, but it just helps to refer to them that way as a they and all of that. And so that's where the stream came from, the stream of David. It's kind of funny. I used to sort of say Abraham sounded so religious-like to me, and it turned me off a little bit at first until I really got into it. And I loved it. And then I come up with the stream of David, and people think that sounds religious. So
Yes. Yeah, I know. I kind of
what I
thought
mean
that
is it's a
myself.
stream of
Is that funny?
consciousness, and it's just my consciousness that I'm channeling, and it's the stream of David. But I do refer to that. I like to segregate and say the stream is source. When I get into trance, that's pure source, because I learn things there.
Mhm.
I hear
Yeah.
things that, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way before, and it's coming out of my mouth. That's when I
Yes.
know that I'm channeling. When I'm in
Yes.
casual conversation, I believe the stream is present. I believe when I say something, I can do that right now, but my ego is very much engaged in this conversation, which is fine,
Yeah.
because I think I teach better that way. And I've
Mhm.
always wanted to take the source information and how do we apply that? That's where Taya came from. The Taya practice,
Mhm.
TYA, is the application of what they teach, because a lot of people are channeling, and it's great to speak to source that way directly, even though you can do it yourself and get clarity on things and ask the questions. People love that. But then how do you really take that and make that a way of life? How does it really help your life to do that, to listen to that information?
Right. I mean, that's the big question, right? But it's funny because um, I've channeled for many years myself, and so a lot of what you're saying totally relate to what you're saying. Um, and one of the things that I've been saying a lot lately, so everybody's going to roll their eyes, but it's that word again, sovereign. we're sovereign beings. We can make up our own minds. We can access source ourselves. We don't need a guru or anybody else to do that. And it's regular people that can do this. Now, you mentioned the Taya practice, and the hour has just flown by. I mean, we could probably spend a week talking, but I do want to certainly touch on. You use the word detuning, and if you could give us some context with that. And then TYA, if you could explain what that is. You have a whole book about it. So, of course, listeners and viewers on YouTube, they can certainly find out more. But let's get into that just a little bit with the time that we have.
Certainly. Well, I like to use the term detuning because if you've got something in your belief system, and our belief systems run our lives, our belief system is like our human operating system, like your computer has an operating system. So your life is very much a reflection of your beliefs. You've created a belief system for yourself that sort of runs on autopilot from the subconscious mind, and you default back to your beliefs. This is where all your triggers are, and all of these things are really what's why your life is the way that it is right now. So to change your life, you've got to change your belief system. And you don't just change your belief system overnight. You've spent a lifetime creating it. So we go in and look for the areas of your belief system that are lowering your vibration and limiting you. And we do tune those things. And you don't just flip a switch and say, okay, I'm just not going to believe that anymore. You can do that for a moment, but then what you're going to find is that, we're not always in high vibration. Polarity is always going to take us on this sort of up and down vibrational journey. We all know that because it's how our days and our lives go, and it's expressed in our emotions. So when you're in the lower vibrational flow, it's not as easy to do those things. Those old beliefs tend to come back around. They pop up, or you get triggered by something. Well, if you've got a trigger, you've got a belief that's driving that trigger for sure. So what we want to do is sort of, what are the things in my belief system that are not serving me, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough, that I'm not good at relationships, whatever it is in your belief system. It's that way because you believe it's that way. Change your belief and it will change. So we detune the things that cause that drive that, and you detune it over time. And the only way to do it is to create a system for yourself where you're catching yourself when these things pop up, because you can't detune all of it. So when something pops up, what we tend to do is we get triggered by it. Maybe it takes us down our spiral for a period of time. And then naturally that polarity is going to pull us back up. And when polarity pulls us back up, we want to forget all about it. Pretend like it never happened. I don't want to go back there. I'm feeling better now. I wasn't even functioning a day ago, whatever it is. And what I say and what I teach is, gosh, learn to get your vibe back up, because you do have control over this. And then when you're higher, then revisit the trigger from a higher vibrational perspective. And don't think that you don't need to worry about it because you're up your spiral. Because when we're higher, we don't worry about things as much. But now that I'm higher, I actually have the creative energy of source behind me. So I can solve anything up here. So I always say, if you're really frustrated by something and it's frustrating you, walk away, go take some deep breaths, go find 3 to 5 things to appreciate, even if it's just a blue sky or a car that you like or whatever it is. Come back to it and you'll notice that you have a lot of solving power. It suddenly fixes itself. Why was this frustrating me so much 5 minutes ago? Now all of a sudden it's just fixed. What the hell happened? Well, you changed your vibe. And now you have the solving, healing power of source on your side. So make a practice of doing that. What are my transgressors? What am I labeling as should not be in my life and in the world? There's probably quite a few things. You sit and just start listing things. My life, column 1, didn't like my stepfather. I was abused by this person. I had this terrible boyfriend in high school. I was called fat when I was a little kid. Whatever it is that's going on in your life, list all that stuff from your earliest memory to now, no particular order, and then list a list of things that trigger you about humanity: war, famine, poverty, inequality, inequity, Holocaust, all that stuff. That's probably going to be a pretty long list. That's your list of stuff to work on. But that work is very valuable, because as you start detuning these things, meaning, how can I find appreciation for that so that it's no longer a transgressor in my life? I have shared that in this interaction, how I found appreciation for my mother. I found appreciation for my father. I found appreciation for My childhood, my lack of learning ability in a formal education setting, I detuned all that stuff. And I still detune things to this day. Somebody made a joke. I had an ad going a while back about law of attraction. They said, if law of attraction real, you wouldn't be bald. I thought that was so damn funny. I never thought about that. I never thought about attracting hair. Just when my hair started falling out, I decided, why don't I just shave it all off and not worry about it? And turns out I think I look pretty good bald. So I haven't ever thought about it again. So that's not even a transgressor for me, but somebody else looks at me and thinks that it must be, because their belief system is that bald is bad. What a silly thing, right?
Yes.
So we all have stuff in our belief system that we judge for other people and for ourselves. You detune it by just not caring, by authentically finding appreciation for it. And sometimes if it's big stuff for you, especially that has impacted you personally, it takes time. You detune over and over and over again until it's really authentically gone. This is not bypassing. We're diving right into it and detuning it. What can I appreciate? And I always say, one, don't start with your most horrific, most challenging transgressors. The person that systematically abused you as a child, for example, don't start with that. Build momentum toward detuning. And then once you detune some lighter things, you'll see that, oh, I can do this. I can learn to do this. And this is something that you're learning to do. Then start thinking about, if nothing else, I now know what it's like to have experienced that.
Right. I mean, there's always something. There's always value.
There is.
There's always
There is.
value.
If you look for it, you will find it. If you refuse to look for it, then you're not going to find it. And there is a
Right.
lot of refusal. And it's okay. If you refuse to do this, you're just not going to do this. It's fine. The
Right.
Kaya practice is I took, and it was one of those things there's not many things that I say are divinely delivered from source. The Taya practice was divinely delivered from source. I quit my job in 2017, had a podcast. I had no idea how I was going to make a living sharing the stream. And somebody turned me on to doing an online course. And in the beginning, it was called Abundance Breakthroughs. And I started teaching it. I had a podcast, and it was a few $1,000s to join this program that I had. And all of a sudden, I had a line of people wanting to take my program, which was great. From that, we all created Taya together. I channeled the entire course and spent from early 2018 to now. I still teach this boot camp, but it's an expensive thing for people to do. It takes 12 weeks. It's a big deal. I wanted to teach it to everyone, whether they could afford to take boot camp or had the time for it or not. That's why I wrote the book. The entire practice, I'll plug the book, is in the book. That's why the book is so thick. I always show it off. It's not just take our boot camp and learn everything. So you can learn the whole practice from the book. You can learn the whole practice just by listening to my podcast. So I do teach Taya all the time. I do Taya Talks every Tuesday on YouTube. I teach it all the time. And it's basically taking everything that Source is telling us and breaking it down into 4 pillars to operate your life with. And if you operate your life every day with these 4 pillars, you start to systematically raise your vibration, and you have an awakening experience. Life just gets better, and it changes everything. Those pillars are appreciation, source, polarity, and intention. So those 4 things are what's in the book. And those 4 things, when you learn how to work those 4 pillars and make it a way of life, your life really does transform. We have lots of proof of that now.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. I love how the course came together like that.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that I channeled it, and then all of a sudden, I can't even tell you, TYA, Trust Your Abundance, 4 pillars. I don't even recall how it all happened. And it happened quickly, very, very quickly. Right as I started it, it just became Taya. My course became Taya Boot Camp. Everything became about, this is the system that you're creating, that, all this channeling is wonderful, but how do we actually allow it to help us and move us forward?
Remarkable. And so, where can they find out more information, David? Because unfortunately, we're really about out of time.
TheStreamOfDavid.com, the Stream of David podcast, the Stream of David on social media, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. Busier on YouTube and TikTok these days. We tend to get more interaction in those mediums, but we're everywhere.
Awesome. Oh, I love the consistency. I think that's really smart. Wonderful. David, thank you so much for being on the show and bringing forward some heavier things, but some inspirational things. And I am hopeful that some of our listeners will go further, will be more curious about this, because It seems to me if people really want to shift how they're experiencing life, this could be what they've been looking for.
That's the intention. And that's why I don't just charge to share it. I share it everywhere, far and wide, because wherever you are in your abilities, I want you to be able to get this.
So appreciated. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. It was lovely meeting your audience.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks. Hello, everyone. It's Andrea, and I have a special announcement to make. I'm very excited to announce my 2 Reiki classes that I will be teaching in person this summer. They're going to happen in the United Kingdom. I'm traveling there from Michigan here in the United States, and I cannot wait to meet my Reiki students there. We'll be at the beautiful French Partridge Hotel near Northampton, and I will be teaching a Reiki 1 and 2 class June 13th and 14th, and then the Reiki Masterclass begins the 16th and goes through the 19th. We have special hotel accommodation packages available as well. Again, I cannot wait to meet you there and share Holy Fire Reiki with all of you. But class size is limited. To find out more and reserve your seat, please head over to mainstreamreiki.com. You'll see a banner at the top of the page. Click that. You'll get all the information. If you have questions, send me an email. Thanks so much. I hope it works out that we meet in class. Thank you for listening, and you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.